Pam Darden, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, for the record, I'm Christy Craddock, Chairman of the Railroad Commission of Texas. The Railroad Commission appreciates the committee's support for our baseline budget, which addresses most of our fundamental needs. Specifically, the funding for our state-managed well plugging program, our IT upgrades, and our fleet vehicles are appreciated. Currently, our IT upgrade is on time and within budget. Many of you have heard me say in the past that our agency used to be run on a mainframe with Fortran. The strides that we have been able to make as an agency because of the continued support of this body have allowed us to step into the 21st century and into the cloud by improving our application process, inspection procedures, and providing increased transparency to the public. While we are in our final stages of our IT infrastructure project, we do have several exceptional items, mainly related to additional regulatory responses, and I wanted to highlight a few of those here. The first of these is additional request I'd like to bring to your attention is our request for $7.6 million and 2 FTEs for a produced water and injection data reporting system. The increase in oil production over the past 15 years has led to a tremendous increase in the amount of produced water from well sites, and industry sees value in recycling this water and turning it into a resource rather than a waste product. Produced water is water that is brought to the surface with the production of oil and gas and is an inherent part of the oil and gas production process. Disposing of produced water by injecting it deep underground increases risks associated with overpressure, such as service breakouts that increase drilling cost. The industry needs data on the potential for opportunities that treated or recycled produced water offer as a resource to Texas. Next is our request for $2.7 million and 2 FTEs for an oil and gas authorized pit registration system. Operators are currently authorized to use certain pits during normal oil and gas operations, but the Commission does not have a complete picture about the existence, size, location, or use of these pits. This new system would allow operators to provide more complete information. The agency will inspect the pits as part of its inspection process to ensure no oil and gas activities pollute surface or subsurface waters. The data collected under this program would be available online and to the public. We need this funding because the agency rulemaking we finished in December, led by Commissioner Wright. These rules, which had not been updated in more than 40 years, include legislation passed by Senator Nichols and Senator Perry, and this funding request will allow us to fully implement these rules. Third, the Commission is requesting $6.2 million to create oversight and safety regulatory filing and permitting systems. We currently do not have online filing capabilities for the gas utility annual reports. Each year, we receive approximately 10,000 pages of documents that must be scanned for later retrieval, and certain data must be manually entered from the reports. This project will provide a more user-friendly and efficient online filing system that enables the gas utility community to comply with regulatory requirements, allow us to create and track consumer complaints online, and provide industry, legislators, and the public with better access to Commission data. This exceptional item would also allow individuals to electronically submit propane applications and track their status online, which would streamline the licensing process for both the public and the Commission. Additionally, we seek $2.7 million and 10 FTEs for an underground injection well investigation team. The Commission has a critical need for professionals to investigate pressure problems resulting from the injection of produced water. The Injection Storage Permits Unit is currently staffed to issue permits and to perform monitoring and compliance of existing permits. But the unit is not currently staffed to devote the time necessary to investigate reservoir scale problems. This team will provide us the resources necessary to do so. While we focused our efforts on stopping damage caused by surface flows, our ability to assess, characterize, and evaluate these events is limited. This investigation team would be charged with gaining a better understanding of the root causes of surface breakouts and seismic activities, and the data would provide leadership and the public with better tools for mitigating the effects going forward. Finally, we're requesting $342,000 and 2 FTEs for site remediation program support. The agency has a critical need for experienced staff with a specialized skill set to monitor complex cleanups in sensitive areas and to respond to public information requests about cleanup activities. I'd like to point out that you have given us some of the additional FTEs for the items I just highlighted, which I certainly appreciate. However, we need the money for these projects for them to be successfully implemented. Now, I'd like to turn your attention to the big ticket item on our list, which of exceptional items, which are our request for the $100 million for orphan well plugging. As some of you may recall, 8 years ago, the legislature began appropriating additional items for the purpose of well plugging and site cleanup. Today, we're budgeted $22.75 million a year in OGRC funds to plug 1,000 wells a year in an effort to address the state's orphaned and abandoned well population. The Commission has exceeded that performance measure every year. While we still have work to do, well plugging costs have risen dramatically, and we need to be able to account for the challenges we've also been having with emergency wells. 8 years ago, the average cost to plug a typical well was around $15,000. Today, less than a decade later, it's costing us an average of more than $57,000 per well. In each of the last 3 years, it's cost the agency more than $10 million per year of that money to plug just a handful of emergency wells. An emergency well, by definition, is generally a leaking well, some of which have extremely high water flow rates, and much of the cost is from hauling water. During an emergency well plugging job, like many other types of emergencies, the Commission, as the responding agency, must be mobilized immediately. Often these emergencies end up costing us significantly more than a routine plugging job. In fact, already in this fiscal year, it has cost the Commission $9 million of our $22.75 million budget to plug just 2 emergency wells. That's 40% of our well plugging budget for the year, just on 2. While we obviously prioritize plugging wells that pose a higher risk to public safety and the environment, the practice of plugging 1,000 wells at $22.75 million a year is no longer sustainable without further legislative action. In addition to managing emergencies, high priority wells with high H2S, which is hydrogen sulfide, high temperature and or high pressure should be plugged regardless of cost due to the potential threat on environmental health and safety. In addition, and Senator, you asked this, the status of our federal funds for well plugging remains uncertain right now, but we still have to have funding to plug wells, and I'll be glad to get into that more if you have a question. Therefore, we're seeking $100 million to address the rising cost of overall well plugging, better manage emergencies, and to reduce the backlog of expensive high priority wells. And at the same time, we're seeking an adjustment to our performance measure so it realistically reflects today's plugging cost and that we as an agency can better address wells across the state. With that, thank you very much. We appreciate the help this session, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just one quick question. That is, orphan wells have been such a problem for many, many years.
Yes, sir.
And you're plugging 1,000 wells a year. Are you keeping up with the number of orphan wells that are created every year?
No, sir. In fact, we have more orphan wells coming on than we are plugging. We've exceeded our plugging numbers every year that you've been giving us additional dollars, but we still have more orphan wells that keep coming.
Senator Nichols, I know you.
I've been waving that flag
Yes, we've talked about it several times.
a number of sessions, but it sounds like it got worse. The 2 big blowouts or emergency wells that cost $9 million to plug, were either of those bonded?
Just a second. No, sir, those two were not. In fact, one of them, the one that cost the most, I wanted to double check with my people. And the one that cost the most actually wasn't a well bore at all. It just was where water started flowing. And we hauled 100,000 barrels a day off that site for about 2 weeks and drilled a new hole to make sure we could plug where the water was coming up.
Okay. I'm going to kind of jump back away from wells, plugging wells. On the IT, that's every session for the last number of sessions.
Yes, sir.
We had phase 1, phase 2. Phase 5, I was listening real careful. You said is the final?
This is our final big phase. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
And that part is reflected in our budget already. The phases, what we're asking for in exceptional items are things that are now regulatory that we didn't anticipate when we planned 8 years ago. So we've got more water issues, and obviously, since we've done the new pit rule, we want to make sure that IT is reflected in our projects.
On the source of the funding, I know historically they've used general revenue, which I've always thought was kind of strange because we've got severance tax that are directly related. You don't really care what the funding source is.
That's your decision, Senator.
All right. I would think that we ought to give consideration if we're going to put more money into well plugging, that we use our severance tax money, which is generated from the well producing, instead of our general revenue. I've always thought that was kind of strange we did it that way. But I thought I have no more questions. Thank you.
Senator Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your produced water initiative is gaining ground. Obviously, it's been a focus of mine for 3 or 4 sessions now. I know we've got 6 pilot projects in the Delaware Basin and out in the basin, I guess, in general, for determining beneficial use and ultimately possibly potable standard. I know y'all are doing internal produced water studies and conversations too with your stakeholder groups. Most of them overlap between the initiative from the Produced Water Consortium as well as industry. Sometimes the coordination, I don't know, is very transparent, but I trust the groups are working. Can you kind of give me where y'all are at in the produced water arena? I will tell the members we have 6 pilot projects I'm aware of, 3 of them under the Texas Tech Water Consortium. They're into their 3rd growing season, I believe, of beneficial use for agriculture. It's showing lots of merit, being able to use that water for growing plants and things like that. We're into the biomass testing, which is testing the soil to see if there's an accumulation of harmful products, and just the sheer essence of time elapse is what we're waiting on to prove some of those concepts up. You have to have some history, right? So it's moving in the right direction on that. There's 3 private sector industries that are way ahead of the curve as far as some of the initiatives that we're generally are. But can you kind of give me a broad picture of where you see we're working on statute tweaks for produced water this session, so that when and if that thing comes to fruition in the next 2 to 5 years on multiple levels, the state's ready to go, that we're not going to come back and need another 2 to 4 years to get the statute to mirror where produced water lands. So we're working on that. But just generally speaking, where as an industry is there work to be done and emphasis being placed that may not be tied into the consortium energy efforts?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for your leadership. Being from West Texas, as you are, water is really important, really for the whole state, but you and I both understand that. We could be like East Texas if we figure out what to do with this water. So what we have as an agency prioritized is if people want to come out and recycle and or prove up their produced water, we've put guidelines in place this year, or I guess last year at this point, for projects to come in and be permitted. And I had 2 companies come in the past few weeks saying, we're glad y'all let us do it because we've been able to prove up faster than if we hadn't had some guidelines in place. We also have a whole part that's part of our expertise of people we're looking for. Produce water, not only are we trying to prove it up, but also figure out what else we're going to deal with and how we're going to deal with it smarter. So those people would be important. We have some smart people. We just need to add to that team. And the other piece that industry came in last year and we've been looking at as well is how much data can we collect? What do we do with that data, whether it's pressure issues, whether it's the kind of water? We seem to be the correct place for produced water to be housed in all of that data. So we are in conversation with industry right now to figure out what that looks like for us, which is why we're asking to expand our IT project to allow that data to come to us as well. That being said, we're also working, as you know, with TCEQ and looking at how their projects are working, and we have MOUs, and so we're working together to try to move these projects, both agencies, I think, along quicker.
How much produced water is imported for injection purposes into Texas from outside of Texas boundaries?
I'm not sure I know that off the top of my head, but I'm happy to get that number.
For me? I'd be interested in knowing that.
Yes, sir.
So on well plugging, everything after COVID got out of control on cost, and I expected it to kind of level off and come back, but I guess we're in the new norm for real. I didn't really think it would stay. The truth of the matter is, something's going to break up and down the line, all cost, affordable housing, all those other conversations. There's going to have to be a break somewhere in here, because either there's a lot of people making a lot of money, or those that are pushing that cost up think that there's going to be a continuous stream of money, but it's reaching a breaking point, I guess, is where I'm going. But what component of those well plugging that has exasperated that that cost increase? What is it, labor, or is it the severity of the acuity of the wells? I mean, is it the type of wells that you're having to tackle now as opposed to the $15,000 well that was just routine? What's changed to drive that to 2 wells for $4.5 million cleanup?
I think you named both of them. So one, labor, we've got fewer companies out there that are plugging wells. So they can name the price, so to speak. The cost of labor has gone up, as well as the quality and the type of wells that we are now plugging. So I had somebody explain it to me this way: if we're plugging in the Panhandle, for instance, it may cost us $15,000 to plug a well on average, because they're shallower wells or older wells. If you get down in the Permian Basin, those are costing more in the $50,000 to $57,000 and up range, because they're deeper. There are more issues with those wells. They're old. Some of them are older. Some of them are newer.
So this is a new phenomenon, because we've always had deeper wells. We've always had shallow wells.
No, sir. I'd say this. It's not a new phenomenon. We've plugged a lot of the shallow stuff.
Okay, so you're now moving. You're moving down the food chain.
Yes, sir. We are.
So kind of like I tell people, we've developed all the cheap water. The next step's going to be more expensive. Same deal. Okay. Orphan wells, by description, you don't know who owned them.
That's correct.
Popped up. But how much investigation do we really go back into to trying to find out who owned them, and if they're still in existence in some form or matter that we can charge them for it?
We do have a process for that, because, and I'm be glad to get somebody come to your office and explain that in detail. But we do, if that well exists and it's an active well or inactive and we have the paperwork, we know who that person is. If it's somebody who's walked away, we go research to try to find the operator. Most of those people are bankrupt, died, disappeared, wherever they are. If there is a bond associated with some of those wells, we go get those bonds and acquire that, and the Attorney General's office helps us with that. If there is no bond, then whatever it is, we acquire those wells, because that's the policy over here.
So 10 wells come through your doorstep today. How many of them are going to be legitimately classified as orphan wells on average?
Depends on the well. I don't know that I can't tell you the answer to that.
I mean, I've been told we have 100,000 orphan wells. I've been told we have 400,000 orphan wells, but I've been told we got 10,000. I don't know what the number is.
So today on my books, I have about 8,500 orphan wells. I was asked for the metric. Let me say this, because I don't have an answer, and it's unpredictable. And I'm not being cagey, I'm telling you. Today, we have 250,000 active wells and 155,000 inactive wells on our books. At any time, through different ways, those could become orphan wells.
Right. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is the bond like $25,000 bond? It's very low.
It's been in statute that y'all have put in statute, Senator. Y'all have chosen not to change that. That's conversation over here. There are different levels of a
What's
bond.
the maximum bond that we could assess to
I think it's $2 million. Right? $250,000. $250,000.
Is that based on the acuity of the well?
It's based on the number of wells that you have. A big operator probably is paying, it has a $250,000
A
bond.
big operator could have 10 of these $4.5 million problems, and maximum exposure to the bonding company is 250.
Potentially, yes, sir.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Senator Bendecourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christie, Commissioner, always great to see you, as in Commissioner Craddock. Just going through you say we got 250,000 active wells, 150,000 inactives, and about 8,500 abandoned.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure that number changes, so it's there's not any Lloyd's of London, there's no insurance for the state could get a hold of that could possibly cover any of these costs, could there?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
I didn't think so. It's obviously too variable and too deterministic on the state at this point. Now, the areas that we can cover, okay, which I think are important exceptional items to talk about here, is you've got you're still having a lot of exceptional items on IT. And first, one question. How far have you gotten on the microfilm digitization? I'm sure that you have X number of file cabinets with them at this point, or
We've made some progress. In fact, when LBB was reading out, they zeroed out a number, and I thought, oh, we've zeroed out. And I turned around and they said, oh, no, that's just for the district offices. We've managed to catch up for everything. So this is an ongoing, we have a lot of data, a lot of libraries. So.
Okay, so basically the district offices have been cleaned out, but the Austin, office is still got, I would assume, millions. Okay.
I think that's fair, yes.
All right. Now, let's talk about a cloud migration. That's kind of an odd thing to put into a exceptional item. So why are we not taking care of that as a budget item?
I'm sorry, which one are you?
Well, it's the GIS cloud upgrade.
Oh, yes, sir. So our GIS is our mapping system.
Obviously.
When we did this and when we upgraded IT, we just left it on mainframe. We'd like to make sure that we upgrade all of it into the cloud. When we started our IT project, as you know, we're on mainframe Fortran. As we moved along, we decided to skip just putting it someplace and sticking it in the cloud. So we didn't do GIS upgrade. That was the first project we did. One of the first ones when I got here. We didn't put it in the cloud initially. We'd like to go ahead and put everything in the cloud.
So there's a term that I'm going, ArcNet, is that the technology y'all are using, or do you know? Okay.
That's correct, yes.
That is, okay. So, and the next revision will go from ArcNet, I think, to another software source, right?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, and then let's see, one other one here. You're talking about some of your data collection and reporting systems. Now, my good colleague to my right over here would know what exact produced water and injection data we're talking about, but could you give us a description of what you're trying to get for that 7.6?
Sure. Part of what we're asking and part of the data we're trying to collect, pressures, volumes,
Okay.
Where the water's coming from. And we have an old system in place. We call it our H10 system that's in hard copy. So we want to morph that all onto the cloud to begin with. But a lot of this data, we get data mined, as you might imagine, from industry. We also want to be able to use this data if we have a seismic event.
And
Yes, sir. Or as we're doing produced water, where that water, the quality of water, potentially where it's coming from, so people know. So as companies, and I'll let the senator, I know he's been part of that conversation as well. But a lot of it is helping us manage some of the challenges. We remind ourselves we're not in the oil and gas business; we're in the fluids business, and water's a big piece of that.
sure, no, especially when it's when it's a post-production matter of fact. So with that, you're trying to keep pressures, flows, other specific things that can be measured. Okay, so it can be fixed if it's mined correctly from the data standpoint, and you'll have some backup. Now, you said this is hard copy, so you can't even get electronic files on this?
So some of it we have, our H10s, we've moved to electronic. But we would like to have it all electronic. The last piece, when you ask of our IT, the last piece, one of the last parts that we have still to build and that will be finished this year is our saltwater disposal part of the world. So this goes in lockstep, that this exceptional item goes in lockstep with that. As we're building that new system, it makes more sense to go ahead and add all of this data request in.
And I'm testing your memory banks, but the salt water we're talking about here is many times that of a concentration of what's in the Gulf, true?
Most of the time, yes, sir. I don't think we want to drink it today, but that's what the senator next to you is going to we're trying to figure out is how we take that produced water and use it differently.
Right, I'm just leaving him a softball to hit as I throw it up into
Thank
the
you.
air. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Senator Severini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, it seems that the more we invest in this program, the bigger the problem gets, based on your testimony and what we know in our history of dealing with this issue over the years. What long-term planning is underway to ensure that we can eventually resolve the problem? Is there anything we can do?
Are you talking about orphan wells?
Yes.
So, Senator, the policy has been over here, and it is a law to be changed, but the policy's been over here to allow wells to continue to be inactive, thinking that maybe somebody will, and there's a process that they have to be inactive. They have to file this paperwork, make sure they're environmentally sound. That some of those inactive wells are some of some of the wells that probably should be plugged long term. But that's a conversation for this building and for you with industry to figure out how to resolve the problem. I'm asking for direction at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There are no more questions.
Oh.
Chair Craddock. I'm sorry. Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking for my notes, but I'll just go from what I recall was in them. I wanted to ask about Senate Bill 900 that we passed, 2 sessions ago, maybe? I think it was, I'm sorry, that's next agency. Okay. Your question.
So you got to tell
Yeah,
me what
I
Senate
know.
Bill 900 is, please. Okay.
Railroad Commission.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Senator West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for coming by the office and us having the detailed conversations. I don't have a lot of questions, but how many leaking and unplugged wells exist in the jurisdiction, under your jurisdiction?
So the orphan well population that we have at this agency today is roughly 8,500.
Okay, I've been advised that question's been asked. Is that correct? So what I'll do, let me visit, we can visit on site. I don't want to slow down the committee, and I know we've talked about this particular issue. Are we taking any federal dollars as it relates to help plug some of these orphan wells up?
We have been taking federal dollars, Senator, today. As of today, we took $25 million in IIJA money in 2023. We plugged about 730 wells with that. We have already, again, about a year ago, took $79 million in additional IIJA money. The project is not going as fast as we would have liked because of some other hoops that the last administration made us go through. We are on pause, and those dollars are sitting. We are finishing the wells and the projects that we have, and we'll wait to see what this administration does and the process that they give us.
You're asking for $100 million.
Just over, yes, sir.
And how many wells will we be able to plug with that?
We've plugged about, do some math in my brain, we've plugged about 1,300 wells with those dollars.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I found my note now. So last year sometime there was a explosion in Deer Park with a above ground pipeline, and there was a report that y'all issued and found no violations. But I wanted to, and those of you who are watching at home or may not realize, there was an SUV that crashed into the pipeline in September is when it was, forcing the evacuation of hundreds of homes and businesses in my district and also in Senator Middleton's district. I know, as I said, your report found no safety violations by the pipeline or the operating company. Energy Transfer, what current resources are devoted to the regulation of above ground pipelines, especially those in residential areas like this one? And if you recall, this vehicle just ran over a fence.
Yes,
Went
ma'am.
through.
So we do hold companies accountable if there are issues. That being said, our rules match the PHMSA, the Federal Pipeline Safety Administration rules. And so that's why we found, and those rules do not include any kind of specific fencing around above ground pipelines. To that end, we as an agency, obviously safety is priority for all of us. We're happy to work with you to have that conversation, but safety for us does not necessarily include knowing where all of the above ground places would be on a pipeline. We do know where the pipeline is. We do inspect the pipeline. We have 480,000 miles of interstate and intrastate pipe in this state. So inspections we do under PHMSA. We've been given the ability to do that. But as far as, let's say, for the last 20 years, we've had miles of pipeline built, and every 5 miles they have something above ground. We don't have that in our database. That's not information we've been requesting.
Okay, thank you. We'll get with you afterwards.
Yes, ma'am. Happy to.
There are no more questions. Thank you very much,
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, for your testimony.
Thank you.